What's up, everybody? You are listening to the Credentials Unscripted podcast. I am your host, Matt Sterenberg, and we've got a phenomenal episode today, the good, the bad, and the ugly of microcredentials. But it's not just me as the host today. I brought in my colleague, Simone. Simone, I wanted to bring you in because, number one, you live and breathe microcredentials. Of anyone that I know, you're heavily and deeply invested in the community and the conversations happening around microcredentials. So I wanted to bring you in. You also know Noah, who's our guest, really well. So set the table for us. Why are we talking about microcredentials? Why are they important? Why should people be excited about the upcoming conversation?
Well, one angle is that microcredentials are taking us across two eras of learning. And just having this experience to live through this transition is great. In a sense, there's a lot for me that microcredential represent when it comes to recognition. And we'll hear Noah talk about that a lot. And in principle, I hope we can surface the point that microcredentials are really just a powerful tool to bring about diversity, equity, and inclusion, just by making learning more accessible, more targeted for all kinds of different segments of the population. And also, they're fun, and they can let us have this crazy conversation with courageous professionals like Noah, who has recently, it's been running this badge summit, which I would frame as the Burning Man of credentials.
So if you're listening and you like microcredentials and you like to have fun, this is the event for you, the Burning Man of credentials. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so sure, it is like that. It's very much community-based, and Noah has really been able to bring together the thinking that was happening across the ponds and in different regions. I do think that this event is positioning as one where all thinking counts, and the way he's designing it with his team is really just to be trying different things, different approaches to co-designing the future of credentials with a lot of courage, as I said. So there is really no boundaries, and that has provided that fertile ground for people to just show up and contribute in a way that is meaningful and that shapes the event in the future years.
Yeah, and that's why I appreciate talking to people like you and Noah, and specifically the conversation on microcredentials is it is a new thing, and so I don't feel like there's anything that's taboo. It's still very much being developed, so I don't think there's any bad questions, bad opinions. I think it really is a community figuring out what this looks like, and because it's still in development, I feel like it's a very welcoming conversation, right, to have. So that's why I think it's really, really an interesting topic.
Yeah, the most interesting thing in cred tech, as someone would say.
Cred tech, never heard that.
I'm just trying to live up to Noah's standards in terms of analogies, or making up creative ways of explaining what's going on.
All right, well, that's a good segue. So without further ado, let's get to our conversation with Noah Geisel. Noah, welcome to the podcast. Tell us a little bit more about your role and what your responsibility is with microcredentialing. How did you get into this world?
Wow, thank you so much, Matt. Simone, it's great to be here with you. A lot going on in that question. As the intro said, I'm Microcredentials Program Manager at University of Colorado Boulder, as well as a co-founder of the annual Badge Summit Conference that is going to be in its 9th year here in 2024 at CU Boulder. And really, my journey into this space was one, like a lot of people probably have, born out of frustration that going back a little over 10 years ago when it was, unwritten rule to basically have a staff meeting in which you play the Sir Ken Robinson TED Talk about the future of education, that you had a lot of, leaders saying, the important thing is creativity, empathy, critical thinking, and then going back into, at the time I was a K-12 Spanish teacher, in rating teacher effectiveness, rating school effectiveness on knowledge level test scores that were totally, the antithesis of what they just shown us in the video. And so I really came to this space of saying, well, if we're saying creativity matters, if we're saying empathy, critical thinking matters, why aren't we measuring those things? And I kind of started to have a bit of a cynical feeling that maybe it's just because it's hard. And so I really was on a mission journey to find and connect with people who were, asking those same questions, and was really lucky to just be following people on Twitter like Simone, like Doug Belshaw and Don Prezant and some of these early people who, really kind of created this space of, recognition storytelling through open badges and verifiable credentials that just, really set me off on a journey of saying this is possible. And, maybe it's hard with the way we've always done things, but, there's really smart and talented people working on the technology and to make it, totally doable on the execution end if we're willing to adapt.
So that, we have a lot of different people that are going to be listening to this, right? Some people are going to be individuals that live and breathe micro-credentials every day, right? They're going to know all the different terminology. They're going to know about the entire ecosystem. And other people are going to be pretty new to micro-credentials. So I think it'd be helpful if we define what a micro-credential is. And there's going to be maybe multiple definitions, but what is Noah's definition of a micro-credential?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, you could get 10 experts, 10 novices, give it a day and probably land on 10 different, definitions that are at least hopefully related or overlapping in Venn diagrams, I guess. But, if in my official capacity at University of Colorado Boulder, we do differentiate between micro-credentials and digital badges. We view micro-credentials as a programmatic term. So similar to a degree or a certificate program, micro-credential, is a programmatic offering. So, a unit proposes a micro-credential, it gets approved, learners declare for, apply to, or enroll in a micro-credential. And when they successfully complete it, the artifact of recognition we use is a digital badge or a series of digital badges. And, I think that, for us, it really comes down to storytelling and recognition, right? That similar to as a diploma is to a degree, digital badges are to micro-credentials, where things get really innovative and next gen, if you will, unless you're listening to this in 5 or 10 years, is that because of that digital aspect of the artifact of that digital badge credential, we're able to do all this extra storytelling about it to contextualize and, in my mind, kind of uptext the credential itself to say, okay, here's what, not just the credential, but here's a narrative of what is credentialing. And I think that really takes us to a place of, these artifacts and credentials, being, just about people, to being something that actually gets used by those people, to open doors and help them access opportunities.
Well, that's a great segue into the kind of initial question, which is like, why are we doing this? Like, what is actually the benefit to learners? What's the benefit to institutions? And I think it's an important, because I feel like well, I might be a little close to this, but I feel like I hear so much about micro credentials, right? It's such a sexy topic in higher education that sometimes it's like taking a step back and going, okay, what are we really doing here? Like, how is this actually impacting and benefiting learners? And then also, like, how is this helping institutions evolve to meet the needs of students and workforce and all the rest? So, like, why are we actually doing this? Why is micro credentialing important? Why should people care about it? If I'm listening to this and I've thought about investing at my institution, why should I care about it?
Yeah, I love that question because I think that too often we dive right into the what, and I think the why is really important because if we don't have a compelling why, buy-in is going to be really difficult. And I also think it's highly contextualized to where you are as a stakeholder within the ecosystem because I think that each kind of constituency is going to have a different why. I think that to that latter part of the question of why you might be interested in investing time, resources, personnel, into this in if you're, maybe in higher education. I think the one really compelling why is, if there's a pretty good chance that this stuff is going to be ubiquitous in a not too distant future, that really your decision is, do you want to wait until, it is a rushed adoption, or do you want to get on board, while you still have the chance to, have a more deliberate, intentional design process where you have the, runway to engage stakeholders, and where you're early enough to where your institution can actually be lending voice to actually shaping what this future looks like. And so, I think that's one really compelling why is, right now you have the luxury of choice. In a not too distant future, I think there's a really good chance your institution doesn't. It's not a choice. It's something that we're probably all going to be doing. And so, that's kind of more of a bully way of looking at it. And so I don't know if I should have started there, but I think that, on the, you'd mentioned workforce, and I do think that, regardless of what your, sort of ethos is around the purpose of, K-12 or higher education, I do think it's important to consider that stakeholder group of, industry and hiring. And I think that, big reason for that is that, their interest in this is a big reason why it's not going to go away and why it's going to become ubiquitous. And, it basically comes down to trust. And, that when employers are looking, to fill a position, they have our resume, they have our cover letter, they have our interview. And if you look at research like Adam Grant out of Wharton, School of Business, and, it says that we're really bad at it. We're not good at hiring. At best, we're good at deciding that we're going to like somebody in the water cooler or not, but not if we're making a good hiring decision. And so, I think the industry is really looking at, trusted credentials that can get granular about skills and achievements and really help, have a trusted narrative of what people know and are able to do, that it allows them before they even get to the interview stage to maybe be making better decisions that, remove some of their biases and help them land at, a sort of top finalist group of who they're going to look at bringing in for interviews, that, just based off of merit, not gender, race, last name, who but actually based off skills that you have that align with the skills they need, that maybe that results in an efficiency in the hiring process that helps them, make better decisions, because bad decisions are expensive. And it helps them also better know you and better know, not just that they want you on the bus, but where your right seat is on the bus, right? Going back to Jim Collins' good to great kind of thinking around stuff. And then, if you shift over to, institutions of higher ed, I think that there's just so much opportunity for us. I think that anybody looks at things like skills-based hiring and the, doing away of degree requirements and job postings. And, I think that there's a default that for the conventional wisdom to assume that that's, a bad thing for higher ed and that it's actually signaling the death of the degree. And, I would argue that that's actually a case of conventional wisdom not being wise. I think that, sure, there's going to be a broader applicant pool of talent because of, the lack of a degree requirement. But also, if we're equipping our learners with trusted, granular level storytelling about the skills and accomplishments that they acquired within the degree, it actually is going to privilege a degree more than ever and give degree holders even more competitive advantage than they've ever had.
And also, like, who's saying that, like, the death of the degree is usually framed in the context of, oh no, this is bad, or it's going to totally change everything that we're doing. Why is the death of the degree a bad thing? Right? Think about the way that we do it today. Like, it's so binary, right? You have a degree or you do not, right? Let's say I'm 4 credits short. I pretty much have all of the knowledge as the person who has a degree, but I don't have one, and doors are closed to me because I don't have the degree. So, and I think that's why institutions are wary. I think it's good to be wary, like, generally, of things that are new, and, like, let's make sure, like, to your point, that why are we doing this? Is this the right method for credentialing people? All this other stuff. But, like, today we have this huge problem where we have so many people that have some college and no degree. They have no credential, right? And so there's nothing to show for that experience that they did put in. So they've got debt, no degree, and there's no way for them to get that next educational professional opportunity. And really, when you think about the history of higher ed, like, that is a powerful thing for them to hold on to basically say, like, you need to be here for 4 years traditionally, and we have this piece of paper, that's going to be really important to you. You really need to stay. And so I understand why people are like, this is a significant change. But I think what you're saying is it's not either or, it's like a both and. Like, how do we do this in connection with each other? We're not taking away the degree. We're just kind of creating a pathway that is awarding alongside of it, as we go, right? And I think that's really the exciting promise, at least for me, is I'm not getting one credential at the end of my experience here.
Yeah, I would almost compare it to an analogy that just popped in my head as, when somebody comes into your home and, the person who judges you by your bookshelf, right? And, right now the system is akin to the bookshelf is there, but it's just book covers. All the pages aren't there, right? There's the book cover is acting as a proxy for the story that's inside, but the pages are not actually inside of the book covers on the bookshelf, right? And I think that where this kind of narrative and storytelling goes, that I keep talking about it, and recognition, is by saying, let's actually put the pages in the book cover, right? That it's not just a diploma. It's, let's go ahead and, not, instead of just having the diploma be a proxy for the story that's inside, we have the ability, because of the metadata, to actually include that story, right? And to be able to say, here are the skills, here are things that align with the National Association of Fill in the Blank Standards Framework or Competency Framework that your company is on the board of and helped write, right? And here's actually rubrics if we want to. Here's examples of what went into the earning criteria that somebody had to meet, so that you go from a sort of vague right now of, here's the name of the class and the grade you got, to actually, here's what you need to do in order to get that grade. And so, it just allows us to supercharge the, storytelling that goes along with the recognition in our credentials. And I don't want to limit us to, 4-year degrees at selective institutions, right? This is also at, regional 4-year schools. It's at community colleges. And, to your point, Matt, about, the literally tens of millions of people just in the United States who have some post-secondary education and no credentials, there's just a huge opportunity that, is both mission aligned probably with most institutions, and also, kind of revenue aligned as well, to look at how this can serve tens of millions of humans, to help improve, their access to, successful outcomes and economic mobility, while also kind of reinforcing our own institution's sustainability.
No, are you on a quest? Are you looking for something specific? What is your holy grail? What are you after? Are you driven by something specific? Did you see the light at some point and said, like, this is where I should go and find it? Is that revealed to you, or you're just following your instinct and you're just in full, like, discovery mode?
That's a great question. And the short answer is, yeah, like, the goal is to change the world. And, going back to 2015, 2016, my colleagues at Aurora Public Schools and I, where we were working on a project, that was our motto every day. How you doing? And it's like, changing the world. That was, very explicitly, we believe that, there's power here to, truly change the world for humans. And, I think that my holy grail is, going back to that notion of, stuff not just being, for people by being about them, but actually being used by them. And an analogy I give it is, when I go and got a mortgage on my home, hundreds of pages of documents all about me, none of it really for me as a user, right? It's all about me. Bank uses it, closing, shop uses it, but I don't actually operationalize it. I just sign on a few pages, right? And I think that historically, a lot of our learning records are pretty similar. That I'm authorize shipping them between different, kind of folks, but I'm not actually myself a user. And I think that that's something that is going to be changing where, as we talk about learning, and employment records, as we talk about the comprehensive learner record, open badges, verifiable credentials, aside from just the what of all they are, right? If people had to just do earplugs because that was overwhelming, totally cool. They're just envelopes, right? They're containers that happen to be digital and powerful. I think the why that is really compelling for me, that's my holy grail, is that the front end UX imagines that a primary user of my credentials is me, that I'm actually going in regularly and looking at my credentials. I'm curating them. I am sharing them out to a scholarship committee, to an employer, to an admissions counselor, to people who essentially opportunity providers, that I am able to use my recognitions, my credentials is a way of opening up opportunities for me in meaningful ways that help them make a better decision, but also empower and enable me. And I really do think that's, we're going to start to see that because going back to that industry side, it's an efficiency for them, right? And I don't want to make it sound like these publicly traded companies, that can, whose stocks go up when they do layoffs, are necessarily, doing this because of what's best for the cogs in the wheel. I just think that there's this sort of magical nexus where the cogs who are humans, it's actually also good for us.
Isn't that a real challenge though? Like thinking about the workforce side of it. Like we have workforce saying we need better representations of skills. We need to find out better ways to hire, right? Then we also have workforce saying like these don't mean a lot to me, right? And there's not this necessarily critical mass of micro credentials or badges at this point where they even know what they're seeing. Like, when do we reach that point when it becomes, I know to ask for this, or when it gets sent to me, I know what it is? Because I think that's always the challenge of like the handshake between higher ed and workforce, which is, hey, we built this thing, and then like, it's such a tall task because when we say workforce, it's like hundreds of thousands of companies, that have all these various needs. How do we know that they actually want this and that they know what to do with it, right? Let's say I get a micro credential from a program. I'm like, do I just send it to like IBM? Like when I apply for a job, like, are they going to ask me for it? Like, I don't know how we even begin to measure that type of thing.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important question. And people have been asking that. I think I heard that question for the first time in 2016, and so it's been around. And also, when you think about it, things don't necessarily move, at this light speed, right? And so 2016 to 2024 is only 8 years. I think of that it took you know, close to 40 years or 50 years for seatbelts to be standard on automobiles, right? Is clear as it was that this is probably a good thing. It was actually, something that they didn't start with, and it was something you had to pay extra for decades, right? And so, when we think that in, less than a decade, we've gone from almost nobody knowing about this to hundreds of institutions issuing these, having dedicated staff, creating these, managing these, and I think we've moved quite a lot in a really short amount of time. And so, I like the lack of patience makes sense to me. The sense of urgency is essential. That makes sense to me, and I guess I'm not necessarily in the camp that is looking around going, how are we not there yet? Why are things so slow? I think that, some of it has to do with also, plumbing, technological plumbing that, people like Simone understand, but that, there's probably under 100 people on earth who do. And so that there's certain plumbing that still needs to come along for, things to be, fully manifested. But I think that, part of it is that it's both the chicken and the egg need to advance, right? That we need lots of employers asking for these, even though most employers are saying we're not going to start asking for these until we see a bunch of opportunity seekers, displaying these, right? And lots of opportunity seekers are not going to think I need to be earning these and displaying these unless opportunity providers like admissions, like employers are asking for these. And so I think it's sort of just a full court press of moving all the chickens and all the eggs at the same time. But I do think it's going to happen. And I think that, part of it is going to be, as certain folks in certain pockets recognize really high quality credentials, right? That they start to notice, okay, we just hired somebody who had this badge. And that was a really good hiring decision. They're going to all of a sudden start proactively realizing, well, this is a really efficient way where we could just pay LinkedIn, a penny an email to, private message anybody who has this credential, inviting them to apply. And so I think it'll be little things like that that move the needle. And I actually just recently heard an example with an employer who was hiring a contract role, and they actually listed the Adobe Creative Educator badge as one of the, look fors in the job posting. And they said that as a result, they actually did get people who'd earned the Adobe Creative Educator badge who applied. And the person they hired was somebody who had the Adobe Creative Educator badge. And so,
Yeah,
that
perfect.
to me is
Everything
like,
works. Yeah.
yeah. Now that was also a manual, deal. So we still need things like, admissions software. We need things like, HR information systems, Workday type systems to be consuming these, and not just saying, if you have digital credentials like an open badge, give us a link here, but actually consuming them in a machine readable way, because that's the only way this scales. And, we're not there yet, but going back to the chicken and the egg, until these HR software vendors have clients saying, you need to do this for us in 18 months, or we're going to put out an RFP for a new software, they don't have urgency themselves.
Simone, okay, so how much of this is displaying and recognizing things that are already happening? And how much of this is actually changing the way that we deliver and teach? You know what I mean? Like, how much of this is just, hey, students have been, you know, just getting the degree for so long, right? And now we're going to credential them along the way. And how much of this is really not, I don't mean disruptive in a bad sense, but like, now that we have this mechanism, we believe in this mechanism, it's going to change the way that we deliver education.
I think the big lift and the real disruptive thing is on the recognition side. But that is really just a signal of what is really changing. And I think this has to do with, all learning counts. So if we frame this journey in a lifelong learning sense, then micro-credentials to me came to lower some of the barriers that we built around academia, and just recognize that, again, any learning experience, long or short, is worth recognition. And then if you stack it around, it may provide a finer grained picture of yourself, and it tells a better story. Also, academia is recognizing that the change of learners, the face of learners is changing, and so they want to have a more adequate offering so that they're more inclusive. So it's not only inclusive in the recognition sense, which is casting a much wider net where you could prove that you have learned something, but also in the way this is bringing more people back into universities in a sense. So I do think there is a little bit of I'd like to think, if I were to pinpoint that to a moment in time in history, this could be a renaissance of learning time.
I think it is a democratization a little bit, right? You think about like, I need to have certain time in a seat to get this very valuable currency of a credential. And now it's opening it up so that you can get credentialed a lot quicker. It's a better recognition of what I know. And it ultimately is putting the learner at at the center, right? And I think that's kind of where this is all leading, is the learner having a little bit more autonomy. And we could get into, which we won't today, like a whole podcast on self-sovereign identity or wallets or whatever else, which I don't think we even have time for. But I think it is the democratization of, and you've heard the term unbundling a lot. Like, I think that's the fear for a lot of people, is that it's totally unbundled. But I think there is an element where that is so critical, just given the problem we stated earlier, which is so many people just don't have time to go to college or the finances to go to college for 4 years and just call it a day, right? There needs to be a different model for many learners.
Yeah, I want to, just hop on that and say that, again, I think that even when you think around unbundling, I think it goes back to who the stakeholder is. And I really want to key on what Simone talked about the lift being on the recognition side. I don't necessarily think that this movement necessitates any disruption in teaching and learning, and perhaps learning design. In the if your learning design is not explicitly already identifying what's happening inside of this learning opportunity, then maybe there's some disruption there. Is that if right now it's just a black box other than course titles, then yeah, this is probably going to be a little bit disruptive. But if there's quality learning design already happening, I think that this really just takes the awesomeness that you're already doing and amplifies the awesomeness by doing more transparent storytelling about it. And I think that going back to your point about learners and meeting them where they are. You think about at as somebody who starts a community college learning opportunity and life happens and they don't finish and they're leaving with, they didn't get the credits for the class, they're not getting their associate's degree, and they're leaving with no recognition of what they did accomplish before they were done, which, creates a more difficult and uphill on ramp for them to get back into, the program when things settle down, they're more able to. And likewise, I think there's other programs where mission is being accomplished before the completion of the degree. And so I met somebody who was got really into river surfing. Is that what it's called? Where people they are engineering basically a wake inside of a river where people jump in with a surfboard and they're surfing in a river. And he just got really into it, found a company that does this because the guys were there surfing with him. He's like, how do I work for you? He starts out interning for them. They told him what classes he needed to take at the community college to learn some CAD. And, he said, at a certain point, they said, listen, like, you now know enough. Like, you can, if you want to finish and get your associates, cool, but we're now good to give you, really good paying job. And he said, and I wasn't the only one. He said, after week 4 of semester 2 of this class, recruiters from all these government, contractors were showing up in the hallway outside of class and hiring people because they knew that once you got this far in the program, you knew enough for them to put you in a seat that they could build clients for. And so for those people, if they're looking at going from wherever they were to making $65,000, maybe they don't think they need to finish the degree. And hopefully most of them do, but a lot of them don't. And again, to your point, they're now leaving without a credential. And we have the ability through this unbundling to say, okay, here's the competencies you did acquire. We're going to credential those. And you can come back and bring those and they'll still be valued to finish your associate's degree. But in the meantime, you have the ability to have an official trusted record from us of the competencies that you affirmatively do have, because the transcript at this point, since is just going to show you as an unsuccessful non-completer.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to end too, because like the transcript, hey, this is Parchment. We love transcripts here, but like it's such an inside baseball document, right? How do we break this down, make it more usable, at least be able to recognize what people know? And I think you and Simone really highlighted it well for me, because like the freak out moment is like, is this disrupting education? The total unbundling, it's totally different. And you're like, no, this. I mean, that that is one conversation to have, but it's really recognition. I think if we focus on that, I think people are on board with that idea. We are wrapping up here, Noah, but I want you to plug your badge summit. So tell people where they can find you, why they should attend the badge summit.
Yeah, thank you so much for that opportunity. Just www.thebadgesummit.com. It is a conference that I like to think of as being a little bit different than a lot of gatherings in that it was born out of community. Back in the day, going back 10 years, Simone and other kind of old school people I mentioned, we were hopping on Twitter every Monday and doing hashtag badge chat for an hour and just, geeking out, asking each other these questions. And, that just online community is something that very directly led to, having an annual in-person gathering. And, we're now in year 9 and hopefully kind of preserving that feel of, yes, it's a conference and it's a conference that has a feel of a community of practitioners on a whole spectrum of brand new to this space to experts who help build this space, getting together, learning, sharing, networking. It's a conference where you're going to meet somebody who becomes, a friend and a collaborator. And, we try and keep it super affordable. We're expanding it to, almost a full day Monday, full day Tuesday, and a half day Wednesday with free pre and post conference workshops Monday morning and Wednesday morning or Wednesday afternoon. Food and all included. So it's very affordable, and we'd love to see it in person in Boulder, Colorado, which is pretty awesome, August 5th through 7th, 2024, as well as an online only Badge Summit August 20th. That'll have recordings from the in-person gathering as well as dedicated content just to that day for folks who aren't able to make it in person.
Noah, I think everyone should attend the Badge Summit, and you're gonna be smarter by the end of it. It's gonna be an awesome time. Noah, thank you so much for joining us. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt, Simone. It's been a pleasure. Thanks to you and thanks to Parchment for creating this space and this platform.
So that is our episode on microcredentials. Thank you again to Noah Geisel for giving us his expertise and insight. I really learned a lot. I kind of came into it thinking, are microcredentials a complete disruptor of what we're doing in education? And really the answer is no. It's just about better recognition of what someone knows. All learning matters. How do we recognize that? How do we give people credentials that give workforce, employers a better idea of what these people know, right? How do we credential people along the way? Which the clear problem statement is so many people have some learning but no degree. And this obviously assists in getting people credentials that prove what they know and how well they know it. So very cool. Go to thebadgesummit.com. We referenced this a little bit, but that's the badge summit that Noah and the Colorado University Boulder puts on. So check that out. It's an awesome conference. If you're interested in microcredentials, that's a great one to go to. Our next episode is with Lindsay Doherty from the Rand Corporation. We're talking about stackable credentials, continuing our season on credential innovation. And a quick note, I had my mic cut out for that episode, so that's why the audio quality wasn't as good as we'd like. But obviously, we'll get that corrected moving forward. And if you haven't, like and subscribe to the page. We've really enjoyed making this podcast. I'm learning so much, and I hope it's valuable for all of you. So like and subscribe. Check out all of our episodes at our landing page. And with that, we'll talk to you all real soon.